Medical Officer Krax adjusted his sensory appendages nervously as the airlock hissed open. Today marked a historic occasion, the first official meeting between the Galactic Alliance and a representative of the newly discovered species, calling themselves humans. Krax had studied the preliminary data for weeks, but nothing compared to witnessing an alien life form in the membrane. "Maintain composure, Officer Krax," Captain Drell whispered, her voice vibrating through her speech sacs. "We must present ourselves with dignity." "Of course, Captain. The med bay is fully prepared for any contingency," Krax replied, wondering if his three hearts might burst from anticipation. The inner door slid open with a pneumatic wheeze, revealing the human ambassador. Krax's ocular organs widened to their maximum aperture, and he involuntarily released a distress pheromone. "Greetings from Earth. I'm Marcus Wilson, representing the United." The human stopped mid-sentence, noticing the aliens' reactions. "Is everything okay?" Captain Drell had backed against the wall, her crest fully extended in alarm. "Security protocols, now. Containment breach." The human Marcus stood bewildered as emergency lights pulsed and a transparent barrier dropped from the ceiling, sealing him in the reception chamber. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, raising his hands in a gesture of confusion. "Did I say something wrong?" Krax was frantically scanning the human with his medical tricorder, the readings causing his skin to shift to a pale yellow, the color of extreme concern among his species. "Captain, the infection has spread across 37% of its exposed dermis. The readings indicate significant tissue damage," Krax reported, backing away from the barrier. "How is it even still ambulatory?" Marcus glanced down at his arms and finally understood. "Oh, you mean my sunburn? Look, it's not a big deal. I fell asleep at the beach yesterday during shore leave. Forgot my sunscreen." The translation matrix processed his words, but they made little sense to the aliens. "It claims the condition is called sunburn," Drell said, emphasizing the foreign term. "A deliberate exposure to stellar radiation? Is this some kind of ritual scarification?" "I don't think it comprehends the severity of its condition," Krax replied, adjusting his scanner settings. "The epidermis is literally cooking. Cell death is occurring in real time." Marcus sighed, pressing his palm against the barrier. "Listen, it's perfectly normal for humans. Our star puts out UV radiation. When our skin is exposed too long, it gets red and sore. It heals in a few days." The alien crew exchanged glances of horror, their appendages twisting in distress signals. "Your species willingly exposes yourselves to stellar radiation?" Captain Drell asked, her voice dropping an octave in disbelief. "Without protective atmospheric layers?" "Well, we have an atmosphere, but UV rays still get through," Marcus explained, growing increasingly frustrated. "Haven't you ever gotten a tan before? Or a burn?" The translation matrix struggled with the concepts, rendering tan as deliberate pigmentation alteration via radiation poisoning. Officer Leda, the xenobiologist, approached the barrier cautiously. "Captain, this is unprecedented. Their homeworld must have lethal radiation levels. Their entire species may be in a constant state of radiation sickness." "I'm not sick," Marcus protested, his reddened face growing even more flushed with frustration. "Look, on Earth we have beaches. People go there to relax in the sun. Sometimes we get too much sun and turn red like this. It hurts a little, but it's not dangerous." Krax was rapidly taking notes. It appears to be experiencing cognitive dissonance, claiming the radiation damage is both painful and not dangerous. Fascinating psychological adaptation to constant exposure. "Perhaps it's evolved to endure these conditions," Captain Drell suggested, her horror gradually shifting to scientific curiosity. Though how their civilization advanced while being constantly bombarded with stellar radiation remains a mystery. Marcus slapped his forehead, then winced at the contact with his sensitive skin. "We're not constantly bombarded. Look, can someone just bring me some aloe vera? Or at least let me out of this box. It's requesting some kind of treatment, Krax noted. An escape from quarantine. Captain Drell straightened her posture, making a decision. Officer Krax, establish a full medical quarantine. We need to understand what we're dealing with before proceeding with diplomatic relations. But I'm fine. Marcus protested as robotic arms extended from the walls, scanning him from multiple angles. The human will be transferred to medbay for observation and treatment, Krax announced, preparing a sterilization protocol on his tablet. We may need to develop entirely new procedures for radiation poisoning at this magnitude. This is ridiculous, Marcus muttered as the floor beneath him began to move, carrying him and the entire quarantine chamber toward the medical bay. I just need some lotion and maybe a cold shower. Captain Drell watched him go, then turned to her communications officer. Contact Alliance Command immediately. The humans are far more resilient than our initial assessments indicated. They're either the toughest species we've ever encountered or completely insane. As Marcus disappeared down the corridor, still protesting his perfectly normal condition, the alien crew couldn't decide which possibility was more terrifying. The medbay of the Galactic Alliance vessel Harmonic Convergence was a marvel of xenomedicine, designed to treat over 6,000 different species. Yet Medical Officer Krax found himself completely bewildered by the red-skinned humans sitting on the examination platform. Please remain still while the diagnostic array calibrates, Krax instructed, his tentacle-like digits dancing across the control panel. We'll have you cured in no time. Marcus Wilson sighed for what felt like the 100th time. I don't need to be cured. This is a minor sunburn. It happens to humans all the time. A circular array of instruments descended from the ceiling, surrounding Marcus with softly humming technology. Beams of purple light crisscrossed his body, while Krax studied the readings with increasing alarm. According to these scans, your outer dermal layer has suffered widespread cellular damage, Krax announced, his voice rising an octave. Your body temperature is elevated, and there are signs of an inflammatory response across 42% of your surface area. Yeah, that's what a sunburn is, Marcus replied dryly. Look, just give me some aloe vera or petroleum jelly, and I'll be fine in a few days. Krax blinked his 3 eyes in sequence, a sign of profound confusion. You wish me to apply plant secretions and fossil fuels to your radiation burns? Are these Earth folk remedies? Before Marcus could respond, the mid-bay doors hissed open as Security Officer Lax stormed in, wearing what appeared to be a hazmat suit 3 times thicker than necessary. The quarantine field has been breached, Lax announced, her voice muffled through multiple filtration layers. The entire ship could be contaminated with human radiation. Oh, for crying out loud, Marcus muttered. I'm not radioactive. Lax pointed an accusing appendage at Marcus. Then explain your glowing red appearance. You're practically radiating heat. That's because I'm sunburned and slightly feverish, Marcus shouted, finally losing his patience. Haven't any of you ever been burned before? Krax and Lax exchanged horrified glances. Our homeworlds have atmospheric radiation shields, Krax explained slowly, as if to a child. No civilized planet would allow its inhabitants to be exposed to raw stellar radiation. Communication Officer Triss burst into the medbay, clutching a data tablet. Her normally blue complexion had paled to a worried lavender. I've been researching human physiology, she announced breathlessly. You won't believe what I've discovered. That I'm perfectly normal and not dying of radiation poisoning? Marcus suggested hopefully. Triss ignored him, turning her tablet to display images of humans lounging on beaches, hiking in sunshine, and swimming in outdoor pools. Humans voluntarily expose themselves to their star's radiation, she explained, her voice trembling with disbelief. They call it sunbathing and consider it a leisure activity. Security Officer Lax recoiled visibly. But that's That's barbaric. It gets worse, Triss continued, swiping to new images. They have ritualistic practices called tanning, where they deliberately darken their skin through controlled radiation exposure. Some even use artificial radiation chambers called tanning beds to accelerate the process. Marcus raised his hand. If I could just explain. The human claims this is related to something called melanin, Cracks interjected, reviewing his notes. A pigment in their skin that darkens when exposed to radiation as a protective measure. So their bodies adapt to radiation? Captain Drell asked, having quietly entered during the commotion. Yes, Marcus exclaimed. Exactly. Our skin produces more melanin when exposed to UV light as protection. People with more melanin naturally have darker skin and burn less easily. The aliens stared at him in stunned silence. You're saying, Captain Drell began slowly, that your species has evolved pigmentation responses to stellar radiation because you regularly expose yourselves to it? Yes, Marcus replied, relieved they were finally understanding. But why? Triss asked, genuinely baffled. Why would you leave your shelters when your star is visible? Marcus blinked. Because it feels nice? The warmth, the light, it makes us happy. We produce vitamin D from sunlight, which we need to be healthy. Cracks was frantically taking notes. They derive nutrition directly from radiation exposure and experience psychological benefits. Is that why some of your kind deliberately redden themselves like this? Lax asked, gesturing to Marcus's sunburn. No. The redness is accidental too much sun. I fell asleep at the beach. Normally we use protective creams to prevent burning. You have protective technology but choose not to use it properly. Captain Drell asked incredulously. Marcus shrugged, then winced at the movement. Sometimes we forget, or don't apply enough, or it washes off in water. The four aliens stood in stunned silence, processing this information. So let me understand this correctly, Captain Drell finally said. Your species evolved on a planet with dangerous levels of stellar radiation, developed pigmentation adaptations to it, created protective technologies against it, but still voluntarily expose yourselves to it for fun. And nutrition, Marcus added helpfully. Security Officer Lax made a strangled sound inside her hazmat suit. They're all insane, Captain. The entire species. We should eject him into space before he contaminates the crew with his bizarre behaviors. That won't be necessary, Officer Lax, Captain Drell replied, though she had taken several steps away from Marcus. But I believe we need to reconsider our diplomatic approach. Any species that seeks out radiation for enjoyment clearly has a very different risk assessment framework than our own. Marcus buried his face in his hands, then immediately regretted it as his sunburned skin stung from the contact. I just wanted to discuss trade agreements, he mumbled miserably. Cracks patted him awkwardly with a gloved appendage. There, radiation human. We'll have you back to baking in your star's deadly glow very soon. But first, I'd like to try this experimental anti-radiation foam that dissolves the top 3 layers of skin. Marcus looked up in horror as Cracks approached with a canister of bubbling green liquid. No, he shouted. No experimental foam. Just let me explain about melanin again. 3 standard rotations had passed since the humans' arrival on the harmonic convergence. Medical Officer Cracks had finally agreed to cease his treatments. After Marcus threatened to file a formal diplomatic complaint about the blue spots that had appeared all over his body following the last experimental procedure. The human had been relocated to guest quarters, though they remained under strict quarantine protocols. Captain Drell had scheduled a preliminary diplomatic meeting for later that day, assuming the human remained intact. Marcus sat on the edge of his assigned sleep platform, absently rubbing his forearm when a thin layer of skin came loose and peeled away. Finally, he muttered to himself, "At least the itching will stop soon." The room's monitoring system immediately blared an alarm. Within seconds, the door burst open and Medical Officer Krax rushed in, followed by Captain Drell and Security Officer Lax, the latter still wearing her absurdly thick hazmat suit. Emergency medical situation, Krax shouted, skidding to a halt in front of Marcus. The human is shedding its epidermis. Marcus looked up, a small curl of dead skin pinched between his fingers. Oh, this is normal. Sunburned skin peels after a few days. The three aliens stood frozen in horror. By the eternal void, Captain Drell whispered. Its tissues are slowing off. I knew it. Security Officer Lax exclaimed, backing toward the door. Terminal radiation poisoning. It's exactly as I predicted. Look, it's perfectly normal, Marcus insisted, standing up. See? He deliberately peeled a larger strip of skin from his shoulder, holding it up for them to observe. This proved to be a tactical error. Communication Officer Triss, who had just arrived at the doorway, promptly fainted. Captain Drell's faceplates fully extended in alarm. Security Officer Lax pulled out her stun baton. It's deliberately removing its protective covering. Lax shouted, restrain it before it infects us all. Nobody is restraining anybody, Marcus shouted back, backing away. This is dead skin. It's supposed to come off. New skin has already formed underneath. Krax approached cautiously with a scanner. The human appears to be correct. There is viable epidermis beneath the shedding portions. He paused, looking ill. You mean your species regularly molts? Not regularly, Marcus corrected. Only after a sunburn. It's the body's way of getting rid of damaged skin cells. Fascinating and revolting in equal measure, Krax murmured, making notes on his tablet. But we must treat this immediately. Before Marcus could protest, Krax had produced a canister of viscous purple gel. This dermal regeneration compound should halt the molting process, the medical officer explained, approaching with determined steps. No more treatments. Marcus objected, dodging around the sleep platform. The last one turned me blue for 6 hours. That was an unexpected but harmless side effect, Krax insisted. This solution is perfectly safe. It's used on globulan swamp dwellers during their shedding season. I am not a swamp dweller, Marcus protested. And I'm not shedding. This is a normal, healthy healing process. Captain Drell raised a limb to interrupt. Perhaps we should postpone our diplomatic discussions until the human has completed its molting cycle. Marcus saw an opportunity and seized it. Actually, Captain, I think we should proceed with negotiations immediately. In your compromised condition? Drell asked skeptically. Absolutely, Marcus replied, trying to look as pitiful as possible while surreptitiously peeling another flake of skin. My government will be extremely concerned if they learn I've been detained due to a minor sunburn. They might even think I'm being mistreated. The alien captain's eye stalks quivered with concern. We have provided you with excellent medical care. Yes, excellent and entirely unnecessary care, Marcus agreed, scratching his arm so that a small shower of skin flakes drifted to the floor. Security Officer Lax made a strangled noise of disgust. But I'm worried my superiors might not understand your concern. They might insist on less favorable trade terms to compensate for my suffering. Captain Drell's color shifted to a worried mauve. That would be most unfortunate. It would, Marcus agreed solemnly, especially since Earth has such an abundance of radiation-resistant materials that we'd be willing to trade. Materials that could enhance your ship's shielding by at least 200%. According to my briefing. The captain's eye stalks snapped to attention. 200%. At minimum, Marcus confirmed, casually peeling another strip of skin. Of course, given my current situation, I'd have to recommend a 30% reduction in our asking price. 30%? Drell exclaimed. 40%, Marcus corrected, wincing dramatically as he shifted position. The discomfort is significant. Krax intervened, waving his medical scanner. Captain, I cannot in good conscience allow these negotiations to proceed while the human is actively decomposing. I am not decomposing, Marcus shouted, his patience finally evaporating. This is normal. Humans get sunburned, the skin turns red, then it peels off. New skin underneath. End of story. To demonstrate, he grabbed his forearm and purposefully peeled off a large strip of dead skin in one dramatic motion. Communication Officer Triss, who had just regained consciousness, promptly fainted again. Security Officer Lax made a gurgling sound and fled the room. Medical Officer Krax dropped his scanner, backing away in revulsion. Captain Drell alone maintained her composure, though her color had shifted to a sickly gray-green. Human Marcus, she said with forced calm, I believe we should suspend all contact until your condition stabilizes. Our cultural differences appear more significant than initially assessed. But the trade agreement Marcus began will need to be reconsidered entirely, Drell interrupted. Any species that considers itself healthy while shedding its outer layer clearly has fundamentally different concepts of physical well-being. But Medical Officer Krax, the captain continued, prepare a remote observation protocol. No direct contact with the human until we consult with Alliance xenobiologists. This is beyond our expertise. As the aliens retreated from the room, casting horrified glances back at him, Marcus sat heavily on the sleep platform. Great, he muttered, flicking a bit of peeling skin. All I wanted was some aloe vera and a simple trade negotiation. Now I'm an alien biological hazard. He looked at the closed door and sighed. Earth won't be happy about this, all because I fell asleep at the beach. Science Officer Prax had not slept for 2 full cycles. The senior researcher had been summoned from the lower decks of the Harmonic Convergence specifically to address the human molting crisis, as it was now being called in official ship communications. Unlike her colleagues, Science Officer Prax approached the situation with methodical calm. She had spent the past 30 hours reviewing every scrap of data on human physiology, comparing it with known biological responses across the galaxy, and formulating a hypothesis that seemed almost too simple to be true. She requested a meeting with Marcus Wilson, who by now had been isolated in his quarters for so long that he would have welcomed a conversation with the ship's waste disposal unit. Human Marcus, Prax began, her voice steady and clinical as she entered his room without protective gear, much to his surprise. I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding. You don't say, Marcus replied dryly, sitting cross-legged on his sleep platform. His sunburn had faded considerably, with only a few patches of peeling skin remaining on his shoulders. What gave it away? The unnecessary medical treatments or being treated like a walking biohazard. Prax's mouth parts twitched in what might have been a smile. Your epidermis isn't slowing off due to radiation poisoning. It's being replaced through a controlled cellular renewal process, isn't it? Finally, Marcus threw his hands up. Yes, that's what I've been saying all along. Sunburn is just temporary damage. The body repairs itself. Prax approached, studying him with genuine scientific curiosity rather than horror. Fascinating. Your species has evolved not just to survive radiation exposure but to repair the damage afterward. This is unprecedented in our records. The door slid open as Captain Drell and the other officers entered, having monitored the conversation. They still maintained a cautious distance, but their postures suggested curiosity rather than fear. Is this true? Captain Drell asked. The human isn't dying? Not even close, Prax confirmed. In fact, I believe humans have developed remarkable cellular repair mechanisms precisely because their homeworld exposes them to regular solar radiation. Marcus nodded emphatically. We've evolved with our sun. Our bodies can handle it within limits, of course. That's why we have protection. Protection? Medical Officer Cracks perked up. What kind of protection? Marcus reached into his travel bag and pulled out a small tube. Sunscreen. We apply it to block harmful UV rays. The aliens crowded around, suddenly intensely interested. May I? Science Officer Prax asked, holding out an appendage. Marcus squeezed a small amount of white cream onto her outstretched limb. She analyzed it with her portable scanner, eyes widening. This simple compound blocks 97% of ultraviolet radiation. She exclaimed, "And you just spread it on your outer membrane?" "Pretty much," Marcus confirmed. "We also wear hats, sunglasses, protective clothing. Some people use umbrellas or stay in the shade when the sun is strongest. Yet you still voluntarily expose yourselves to your star," Communication Officer Triss observed, having maintained a safe distance near the door. "We need some exposure," Marcus explained patiently. "Vitamin D synthesis, psychological benefits. But we manage the risks." Captain Drell stepped forward, her color shifting to a respectful blue. "Human Marcus, I believe we owe you an apology. We have significantly misjudged your species' physiology and capabilities." "Apology accepted," Marcus replied with a smile. "Cultural misunderstandings happen. That's why first contact protocols exist." "Indeed," the captain agreed. "And in light of this new understanding, I propose we resume our diplomatic discussions immediately. Your species' radiation adaptation technologies could be invaluable to the Galactic Alliance. Especially this sunscreen substance," Cracks interjected eagerly. "Its applications could revolutionize our approach to radiation protection." Within hours, Marcus found himself in the ship's conference room, no longer quarantined, but honored as a representative of a uniquely resilient species. The trade negotiations proceeded remarkably well, with the Galactic Alliance particularly interested in Earth's radiation management technologies. "So this sunscreen can be produced in various strengths?" Science Officer Prax asked, examining the SPF information on Marcus's tube. "From SPF 4 to SPF 100, Marcus confirmed. "Though anything above 50 is probably overkill for most humans." "We'll take 10,000 units of your SPF 100, Captain Drell declared, "and exclusive rights to distribute it throughout the non-human sectors of the Alliance." "I think Earth can accommodate that," Marcus replied, struggling to keep a straight face at the thought of the sunscreen company's reaction to an alien bulk order. By the end of the day, a formal agreement had been drafted, including a new section specifically addressing human radiation management protocols. These included provisions that all future human delegates would be scanned for sunburn upon arrival, provided with adequate radiation protection during their stay, and never, under any circumstances, to be treated with experimental globulin-shedding gel. 6 standard months later, Marcus found himself back on Earth, greeting the first official Galactic Alliance delegation at a welcome ceremony on a beautiful Hawaiian beach. He bit his lip to suppress a laugh as the aliens disembarked from their shuttle. Captain Drell led the procession, covered head to appendage in what appeared to be a full-body sun protection suit. She wore a hat so wide it threatened to achieve liftoff in the gentle breeze. Every exposed bit of her blue skin glistened with a thick layer of sunscreen. Behind her, the rest of the crew were similarly outfitted, with Science Officer Prax wearing what appeared to be 3 pairs of sunglasses stacked on top of each other. "Welcome to Earth," Marcus greeted them formally. "I see you've come prepared for our hazardous environment." "One cannot be too careful with direct stellar exposure," Captain Drell replied seriously, adjusting her enormous hat. "Though we are eager to experience this beach leisure you've told us so much about. Just remember to reapply your sunscreen every 2 hours, Marcus advised, struggling to maintain his diplomatic composure. "Oh, we brought our own formulation," Science Officer Prax announced proudly, holding up a container of what looked like industrial sealant. "We've enhanced your SPF 100 with additional radiation-blocking compounds. It's now SPF 7000. SPF 7000? Marcus repeated weakly. Yes, Prax confirmed, though it takes approximately 4 hours to absorb properly and may permanently stain the skin a vibrant purple. A small price to pay for proper protection, wouldn't you agree? As the aliens waddled toward the beach in their excessive protective gear, looking like a cross between deep-sea divers and walking beach umbrellas, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if the universe was ready for humanity's casual relationship with stellar radiation. One thing was certain: he would never forget his sunscreen again.